Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where we are celebrating this week. It is the 100th episode of Kicking Match, if you'd believe it. It has been some ride so far. Some things are broadly the same compared to when I started. Some things are kind of different. Glentoran, they remain in flux, but are pretty great defensively right now. Dungannon continue to produce some of the best young talent in the league, just not at centre back. Some will question why Linfield fans never embrace that starting 11 of theirs. Some will question why Glenavon changed their badge this summer. Broadly, the top six have continued to be the top six, and the bottom have always been the usual suspects. But could that change this year, as Ballymena seem to have completely forgotten how to lose? 8 in a row. Who is going to stop them? I'm glad you've never forgotten to check in on your podcast player each week for this, your regular dose of Kicking Match. I've done 99 podcasts, and now this is podcast 100. I've done a few double episodes, I've done a few interviews, but you know that the bread and butter is me talking about games and doing it with guests. And one guest is fun, but two is a party. I'm bringing in the home team for the big party episode. It's great to welcome back two boys that were literally age 14 when this podcast started, all the way back in August 22. They're from around the grounds. First off, hello, Joe McCallion.
Great to be here, Peter. Hello.
Good day, Ross Welsh, not wearing a party hat.
I wasn't aware there's a dress code, but happy birthday, Kicking Match anyway.
It's not a birthday, it's an anniversary of some sorts. And yes, I don't have too much nostalgic content or some sort of gimmick to this. I'm just here giving what everybody wants to hear. Opinions that you disagree with of your team that have just played. Maybe the odd bit of over-the-top analysis. But mostly, it's for the big question that everybody has every week. Boys, how you doing? Everything good?
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. It's great to be here. And brilliant that you provided us with cake as well for this anniversary.
Again, the cake is all metaphorical. And I tell you, team, though, who is absolutely having a great time and are probably celebrating like it's their 100th podcast every single week, are these boys from Ballymena, the Sky Blues. One of the things I definitely wasn't talking about when I first started this podcast was Ballymena being good. I don't know if it's going to be a continuation of a thing, but right at the top of this podcast, for me, has to be, wasn't a great game. Ballymena nailed on top six contenders now. They can't hide it. I'm not here to listen to these all game at a time stuff. They're top of the league now, 12 games played, 8-1 in a row. It will clearly not last forever. I'm not suggesting that they have the gas in the tank to go for a title run. Or maybe there will be some sort of miraculous Leicester-style run towards the Gibson Cup. But these guys are looking very good for the top six right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not like it's something I haven't seen in football before, as you say, they're with Leicester. So probably people up around Ballymena, certainly not ruling it out. But yeah, what a run that they're on. I think one more win matches the most wins in a row that they've ever had, even up to 9. Absolutely incredible. And tell you, the better thing about it is they actually look good while they're doing it. As you said, that match the weekend wasn't exactly the best, but in other games they've been scoring goals and looking good.
That would be an absolute understatement. I was at that game, and usually I don't want to sit here and go, it wasn't for the purists. But my goodness, I feel saying defence was beating out attack was flattering the defence. There was no connectivity for either team up top. And what's strange about this, for me, seeing Ballymena go on this run and keep on winning, is that that's now the second time in about 3 weeks where I've seen Ballymena play. They're not particularly impressive, but they win out 1-0. I think for sure that this is built upon the spine of the team, and particularly the central spine of the team. Everybody's given a bit of pump up to Kim Nelson. I also want to give a bit of shine to Dahi McCallion. But we also have to return to two players everybody was hyping up before they started playing in Sky Blue. And now that I've seen them a couple of times marshal that middle of the park, Jarvis and Carson is exactly what the doctor ordered. That is what is driving these wins together. They are so, so solid in the parts of the pitch that matter.
At the start of the season, when they're expecting to be down and around a bit of a relegation scrap, the midfield's real crucial in terms of you win that midfield battle, you're going to win a fair few matches. Obviously, it's turned out differently, and that midfield is now just blossoming into a bit of an attacking piece. But those two players have totally turned that team around. And to think that Ballymena could have been struggling in the championship this year, but the fact they've got Kennedy and Jarvis in, it's literally a whole different team.
To see how poorly Coleraine are playing, and they're looking at their rivals in Ballymena shoot from the bottom of the league to the top of the league with a significant amount of their team that didn't do well last year, that must be a blister on the back of your neck that you cannot scratch off.
Yeah, 100%. As you say, they're straight from the bottom to the top. Like, it wasn't exactly, well, it was a poor start. Now, don't get me wrong, the opposition I had at the start of the season, Ballymena, was difficult enough, but something's clicked there, as you have said, and gone right to the top. Coleraine are bound to be looking, thinking some of those players that we have let go definitely shouldn't have.
That's one thing we do have to remember about this run, is that 4 losses on the bounce. And especially when you compare to how they were doing last term, there had to have been nerves. There had to have been ill feeling. If I was Jim Irvin, I would have felt very hot under the collar because there was pressure, there was investment, and results business is what we are in, and that's what they're getting at the minute. And the reason why I want to hype up this idea that they are nailed on top 6 contenders is because, one, can you tell me how many victories Ballymena got in the entirety of last season?
I wouldn't be surprised if you told me it's less than the 8 they have now.
It's 8 on the nose. So they're pretty much there already. There was 4 draws. So they're 4 away from their total points total. They're only 12 games in. They have to do it, 2 more times to pretty much get to the point where it really matters, where the split comes. And isn't exactly an appropriate science because each season is different. But Coleraine, and they had loads of draws last year, Coleraine only won 12 games in the entirety of last season. They're 4 games away from that. So you're talking, they don't even have to go on this big run. I know this is title-winning run they're on right now, but they're actually not that far away. 46 points is what Coleraine had in total last year. So they've already matched what they did last year in 12 games. I've won 8 in a row. The game's coming up. Do they fear anybody? Because they are so tricky for every type of team. Portadown and Glenavon, they're only 1-0 wins, but they're able to see it out and take the opportunities when they come. Joe, they're Cliftonville kryptonite right now.
Yeah, unfortunately they are. 2 losses in a couple of weeks to them is certainly tough to take. Not as hard when everyone else is also getting beat by them, but it's still not great, especially when we really are struggling. I was saying the roster, thinking about Cliftonville just before this podcast, it has been ages since we've won a match. So when you see teams like Ballymena going on the wee runs that they're going on, it's what we need. So it's hoping that we can find that from somewhere.
And of course, the question is if Ballymena are going to be a team who lock themselves into the top 6 and they've got plenty of road ahead of them, who is going to be one of what has been the recent traditional top 6 is going to drop out. And it's very clear based on form, based on results, something has to turn around massively for Coleraine to be in the top 6.
I don't think it just describes Coleraine. I think you can include Crusaders and Cliftonville in there as well. And we're talking about Ballymena on a top 6. Who's going to drop out? Dungannon are no mugs this year either. Maybe a little bit less likely to have the longevity than Ballymena, but there's going to be typical top 6 teams disappointed this year, especially if Ballymena keep it going the way it is. But you're right about Coleraine. Something needs to change there already. And similar to sort of Jim Irvin at the start of the season, there's been investment there, and there's just that extra little bit of pressure with that in the full-time aspect. So something needs sorted out there quickly.
If there is an Achilles heel to this Ballymena side, it is clearly up top. It was something that the three of us talked about at the start of the season, and they are very heavily reliant on set pieces. What, 6 penalties from Ben Kennedy? There's been numerous goals from corners or free kicks, so they are leaning into that. And for all intents and purposes, that game that I saw on Saturday between Ballymena and Glenavon would have been a draw based on what I saw in open play, but down goes Jarvis in the box. Question marks around if that should have been a penalty. I'm hearing more of a divided view. Maybe I was a bit more influenced by the hundreds of frustrated Lurgan Blues fans on Saturday. But again, when it's going for you, it's going for you, and everything for Ballymena, it's going pretty well. The stats don't lie as well. What is it, like 5-6 goals or so they've conceded in all of these 8 games? The stats and the eye test, they are passing.
Yeah, 100%. They absolutely are. And that's the thing. Like, if it was another team, like we've spoke about Lauren in the past with things like this, there's sometimes matches where they don't particularly look brilliant, but they're defensively strong and they get through the match, maybe win it 1-0 or whatever. And you're talking about a team like Ballymena. When it is Ballymena, you're maybe more likely to be harsher on them when they play that way. But it's working for them. You can't really blame them for coming into matches like that, walking away with the 3 points. They don't care how they do it.
I think between now and let's say Christmas, they may drop off those games that they've won against Glenavons and Portadowns that I've seen where it's only just 1-0, and perhaps they may have not been the better team across 90 minutes. Those might end up chipping down to draws. Ditto for the games against the Lawrence and the Crusaders. Maybe they'll just slip back to being draws. In fact, Crusaders is probably a team who were lucky to get a win against them. Thinking back, that was maybe a sign of where it was to come. But I appreciate there's Glenavon fans here thinking the start of their run, and I highlighted this on the radio, started from a loss against Ballymena in late August, which was the start of Ballymena's now 8-game winning run. And they're winning in every competition as well, not just the league. Glenavon also have forward troubles. Also something that the three of us highlighted at the start of the season. They're squeaking in goals and they're looking tight at the back. But on that game on Saturday, they should have had something to punch it in the net. They had very few chances, and the ones that they had, they just didn't have the poise to make it count. Talking about the penalty, just for fairness, where did you stand on that looking back at it?
I think in today's game, it's a penalty for me, personally. I mean, he goes right into the back of him, pushes him over. If it's your own team, I think you're asking for it.
Yeah, it's that old cliche of you're giving the referee a decision to make, and yeah, as Joseph says, in this day and age, you're going to get those penalties given.
That is the most frustrating thing if you're a Glenavon fan. It was a decision that they gave to the referee, and they didn't need to. They weren't under the cosh. It was a nice little pass from Ben Kennedy, but it kind of came out of nowhere. So Glenavon thought maybe they were going to be the ones to slay this Ballymena team. They didn't. They move on. Let's slip then to a team we were talking about there, Coleraine. Stephen Baxter comes in. We haven't talked about that either on this podcast since last week. Starts excellently in league. When they look completely rejuvenated. They looked rejuvenated against Cliftonville last week. That kept on going. Individual mistakes are what Coleraine have to pay for. Nettles and all. They do not have a good day at Taylor's Avenue. And after 11 games, 13 points on the board, 3 losses in a row in the league, you can see why Coleraine fans are feeling massively frustrated about this run.
Yeah, I was tipping them for big things back in the preview pod. I real fancied the look of them. But whatever it is going on up there, they haven't quite gelled, or something's not clicking. And there's a bit of anger amongst the natives up there.
Joe, I feel like you perhaps predicted that this was not going to be a happy camp, and that they were not all it wasn't all going to fall into place and work miraculously from the get-go.
It's one of the few predictions I think has ever gone somewhat right for me so far anyway. But yeah, it can be difficult, that transition full time, and there's a lot of different players coming in, other players going out. It's not easy. You see it all the time. And it's probably one of those things. Like it's a good group of players up there. It'll click eventually, but there's, as Ross said, there's a bit of anger among the fans. I'm sure there's anger among the players. There's probably frustrations in the changing room. It's one of those things that they probably need to get through this tough period now, but once they do, we'll maybe be talking about them in a couple of weeks' time of they went through that tough patch, but they're back on it again now.
That first goal is nightmare fuel to the defender not to deal with that ball and let it just slip underneath when it looked easier just to stand and let it nestle in your boot and move on from there. Every time the ball went high and beyond, the Coleraine defenders looked like they were on ice skates running towards their own goal. It looked to be a real weak point. That shouldn't be something you're worried about. Even when McCallion had the ball, the defense doesn't look to have any confidence.
No, definitely not. And that's one of the things as well, like you're saying about the ball sliding under the defender. Korean are probably thinking it's one of those things, everything is going against them. They're getting unlucky with, like, that's the type of thing might happen in every game, but there isn't a player behind them. And as you say there as well, the defense just don't look confident. Magalitis just was happy to run at them all day. Both assists from him as well. He was happy just to be out there.
And that's not a player who's been lighting the league on fire. He's been one of the performers that perhaps haven't been up to the standard that Sure King needed him to be to keep his job. And it's a game of individuals that's formed together into a team. And that, I talked about it last week. I felt as though despite Carrick having the push, the little bonus from having the new manager, Coleraine needed to go there and get a result. They don't. The fixtures are only going to get harder. We've seen great attacking flair from Coleraine, but when you're constantly trying to win the game from behind, it almost makes you throw your game plan in the bin because you've got to play completely differently with the clock against you.
Yeah, and it's the nature of the goals they're conceding as well. Like getting caught out so easy and behind like that is like proper bottom of the table, can't buy a win sort of stuff. And if they have any ambition of being up around the European places, that's going to have to change quickly. But it's so bleak, and you're right in what you say, and that the game plan has to change because no doubt they'll have set up a certain way, but then once you go one down, you do have to sort of throw everything forward. And Dean Shields is known for liking to play nice football, slow build up, which you obviously can't do if you've got that time crunch on you.
You've nailed it. It's not the style. It's the style that works if you're 2-0 down. It's the style that you take the lead and you turn the screw on the other side and make them make the mistake. They look to be the team that's making the mistake, and you can only blame individual errors for so long. As an outsider, I find it really surprising that when you have Shevlin and McGonigal both fit, that you're not prioritizing them to both being on the pitch at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, I hadn't actually thought about that in a sense of you've got that attacking flair there, and why aren't you prioritizing it, especially when it's not working?
Look, you look like a genius if you're winning, so I could be daft and the rotation would all work if you're winning. But if you look online and you see the laundry list of things that Korean fans are not happy about, that's one that's popping up. I think they see what they're trying to do, but how long do you trust the process for?
Yeah, it's not even that they aren't winning and like they're looking good and they've been unlucky. They've looked real poor and nothing seems to really be changing week to week. So, what is the harm in having them both on there? Two of the better forwards in the league. And there just seems to be this stubbornness where they can't both play at the same time unless he's looked at it and thought these two aren't going to work together. But there's surely just no harm in trying it.
One thing that most managers are talking about, fans are talking about, is this idea that the league is such in flux that if you get a few wins here or there, you go up the table. If you have a bad run, you start to fall down. And that's what all the Carrick fans will hope. 2 wins on the bounce. This one now with their brand new manager, Stephen Baxter. Carrick putting the scud on me last week, announcing him before I even got the podcast out. So I hope my analysis sounded all right, knowing that well, he's going to be announced by the time I hit post on this pod. It was expected. I think circles within the league were talking about this as an idea that if Stuart King was to move on, and he did, Stephen Baxter was going to be a highly sought after candidate. He would see this as a job where he could take over, see it as a squad that he could get something out of, and with the promise of investment, he could thrive again as a football manager. So far, 1 for 1 if we're going to discount the cup affair midweek. It's hard to tell if it's more just a little bump up in form, and it's hard to tell what Stephen Baxter will do to try and get something out of this team. But if you're just putting it down to motivation, good start.
Great start. I was listening to an interview he was doing on Radio Ulster on the way to the match on Saturday, and everything he's saying, it sounds like he's there for the long haul. So it's not just sort of a rescue mission this season. So it's not just players fighting for their place in the team over the next few weeks. They want to be part of a sort of long-term plan. He talked a lot about the academy and the good players coming through, and maybe the likes of Maculitis or Gibson are looking at it thinking I could easily be out in my ear here, so better start picking up form. And based off what we've seen so far, he's working a bit of magic, and I'm sure Stuart King, on one hand he's pulling his hair out, but on the other hand he's been proved right in that he's been saying that this group were capable the whole time, and unfortunately, it seems to have taken him leaving for them to up their game a wee bit, but he was right in that it is a good Carrick team.
I appreciate that you are slightly compromised on this question, Joe, but if you are a Carrick fan, and I think Carrick fans are delighted to have a manager of Stephen Baxter's heritage come to their club. Is he the right man, or is he a big name for a club that wants success quickly? Is this going to be the right match with the right club?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it depends really on what the club are looking. If they're happy to invest in him for a decent amount of time and he's happy to stay there, as Ross says, I think it's a pretty good. I think it's a pretty good signing for them. We saw what he's done at Crusaders in terms of that, youth coming through and building a decent setup there. You could see him building a pretty good squad there. Um, as Ross says about the decent team that's there now, I think it might be a wee bit of a new manager bounce. I think you could see it start to even out as the weeks go on. I mean, even against us before he came in, you know, the players were playing better, and just after Stuart King left. So it would probably take a few weeks to see how the initial. It would probably take a few weeks to see how him coming in actually impacts the team. But I think in the long run, I think it'll be a good option for them.
Just in terms of Baxter coming in, it's not a dissimilar arc to how he came into the Crues all those years ago. Sort of at a low ebb. Obviously, they went down when he first joined, but sort of starting from the bottom, and then Carrick maybe looking to move towards a bit more of a full-time model in a similar way that the Crues did. So he's got that experience of building something like that, and if he wants to stick around for the project, I think it can only be good for Carrick.
Does he have something to prove? Because it's a different kind of job. He was with Crusaders for a long, long time. He's coming into this new role, and people could very easily paint him as a man of years gone by. This is a chance for him to show that he's still got it. Even though he was only managed a couple of months ago, it's a different kind of challenge.
I think in a way, he almost does if he starts poor. You can start to see the questions come in and people going, actually, maybe you should have just stayed retired. You can feel the pressure start to come in at that point. But I think in the long run, he'll probably show, what he did at Crusaders, he could probably still do again.
Ross, we moved to a game you were at. Linfield take care of business against what can often be a little craw in the teeth of Linfield. Crusaders, especially away at Seaview. They looked to have control late stages into the second half, but the Blues didn't make it easy for themselves late on.
No, why would they? Typical, really. I was nervous going into it. That obviously beat us in the midweek, and I never like going to CV. It's always a tricky task. But I was happy enough. We played quite well. I'd say 3-2 flatters Crusaders a little bit. We let them into it, and it did require a good Chris John save at the end to get the win. But overall, happy enough. Always happy to get out of North Belfast with a win.
Unbelievable save from Johns. I think I would have lost my mind if I was at that game covering it. It was tremendous, especially at that point in the game. It could have been the difference between the 3 points and dropping down to one. What did you make of the Crues team? Because there is some old heads that are still doing the business. There's some new faces that are finding their way in this league and making their own impression on this team. But also, there's a couple of wet behind the ears, fairly new players that are being blooded into this side that still have a bit of naivety at this level, I feel.
Yeah, I think that's shown through at times. There is a lot of youth in the team, but the Harry Franklin looks like absolute dynamite up front. That's twice he scored against us in a week. I think they end up giving the late goal to him. But then you do have the likes of your Jordans Forsyths and your Jimmy Gallagher's both looking like they haven't aged a day. And you'd hope that the plan there is sort of they bring through this younger group as they head out the door. But yeah, you could see it at times. It was a little bit of naivety creeping in, but I don't think that affected the match too much on Saturday. But you can see how it could over the course of a season.
Talking about young players getting bled into the team late on to that game, well, you could see it on the bench. All Linfield had to bring on were very, very young players, were probably most in the league, perhaps some unknowns. Is that frustrating as a Blues fan that you're even this early into the season that bench is not looking as strong as perhaps other title rivals do?
Yeah, I feel like a broken record when I talk about this, but the squad is so thin. And even if you think of the outgoings, it was all young players as well. So you kind of look and think, what have we been doing, resting on our laurels? And even, we've got Chris Shields playing at centre back, who is not a centre back. Ewan East is playing at left back, where I'd personally have him at centre back. Matthew Orr has come into the team. He looks about 12. He's been great, but like he's just come out of nowhere.
you,
And
you got away with this last year with Reece Ned and Josh Archer, and I think they are very good Irish League players at the level they're playing, and they have potential to get even better. They'll want to shake off that rookie status about them, but I'm seeing very similar energy emerging again, where be it or be it whoever's going to come in, that well, it worked last season. We've got to use our squad to our advantage. We might just have to rely on these guys to get 15, 18 starts this year.
yeah, and that is not where the squad should be. And if the club had any European ambitions and say they did a Larne and got into the group stage, Larne are able to put out basically a whole separate second team in the Shield and in the League Cup, whereas Linfield during the midweek, it was the bulk of the first team were playing and then a few Swiss players thrown in. And we've been getting away with it more than it's looked good. We've been getting away with having to play your oars and your archers and all that. Fitzpatrick has had an ongoing arm injury for weeks and weeks, and he's played every game, and he hasn't been great. And maybe that's down to the injury, or maybe that's down to other things. But there's no one else to play. So even for a competition aspect, that's not good because Fitzpatrick knows he's starting every game, and that's nothing against him. It's against the management or the scouting or the board or whoever has decided not to bring in anybody. And we're it's threadbare at best.
Joe, there has to be some positivity about this. Every time I get your man beside you Ross on, it's just like, well, here's my laundry list of complaints about one of the best teams in Northern Ireland. I will
I
not
know.
have anybody say this is one of the worst Linfield teams ever, because that is simply not true.
Oh no, no, it is
I'm not.
one of the worst. It's one of the worst Liverpool teams.
Somebody said, was it 2 weeks ago, that it's one of the worst Glentoran teams ever, beating one of the worst Linfield teams of all time. And I'm like, is this, what is going on? Is this just I feel like I'm stuck in a time loop or something, Groundhog Day.
Peter, that is every time I go to the Linfield match with him. I genuinely need to stop for my own mental health. It's ridiculous. Yeah, like I can see where Ross is coming from in a sense of they're not particularly playing well. Anytime I've seen them this season, I've come out of games and thought they've kind of got away with it there. I don't know how much that's the squad as opposed to whether it's the management or just needing to change something. It feels like they're going into games the same way, they're playing the same way, and like at the same time, look, they're second game in hand to go top. So you can sit here and say that's the worst squad and not playing well, but something's working. So Haley's probably looking at it thinking, yeah, the fans aren't the happiest. I'm getting booed the old time, but at the moment it's working. I'm getting through it.
I think what needs to be said is it's working in spite of the manager and in spite of the light squad. And I think the chickens could quite easily come home to roost. And I think you saw it against Glentoran. That's maybe a little glimpse into what could be at certain points of this season.
I have heard that exact thing 5 times in the last 6 weeks.
How are you finding this, Ross? That you're up at the top of the league? I don't think Linfield fans are legitimately taking this Ballymena run seriously. I don't think they're taking the Dungannon run seriously. Despite losing to Glentoran, they just see them as the little brothers who, will come in and wreck the room on them and run away. How are you finding this quiet and prolonged pursuit of Larne at the bottom of the league? Do you feel like there's a certain inevitability that Freddy Krueger's going to come up and pop up with his five knifed fingers of doom and take the Gibson Cup? Or are you still hoping week to week, get the points and hope that they're just going to be whatever it is, the T1000, and they're just going to they're not going to catch up with you?
For me, it is still a two-horse race. I just think Ballymena and Dungannon will fall off, and I could look very silly after saying that, but I don't think they have the quality to sustain it the whole way. So it is Larne for me. In the rear view mirror, they seem to drop points all the time, but handily enough, it's the same time we drop points. So I'm getting no enjoyment out of it at all. And it's just, I'd love them to just don't even play the games, just give them the win for every game, just so we can see where we're at in the table. But I just, I think realistically, they're not getting through the group in Europe, and then after that, it's a bit of a cleaner run for them. And I think you'll just see them get up ahead of steam as they do.
Interesting. I saw some stats there that like Larne, based on whatever metrics that they decide, expected throw-ins or something, that they're expected to be potentially the worst league team in that big 3,000 team division. So they've got a bit of proving to do, and they've only played one of the 6 games that they will eventually play. So it's now internationals, which is mean they've played even less games, is squeezing the league even more. I wonder what it's like to be in your shoes, Ross. Feeling like, do you feel like you've got any distance on them, or are you counting all their points as 3 and you're even at the minute?
I'm counting them as they're winning every game, and then we just really seem to struggle against them. So it's almost like we're sort of behind the 8 ball already. And that's not covering my back. I just think they are a better team than Linfield, and I think they're just odds on favourite. So all we can sort of do is win all the games we can, and the old cliche, better to have points on the board. But in my head, I'm just counting Larne as having them wins.
Moving to the Oval in East Belfast, and the worst Glentoran team ever, they were able to beat out a little spiky Dungannon Swifts. This defensive run at the Oval is one of the least talked about stats in the league. I know Declan Devine's trying to pump it up, but bar that game against the Crues where they somehow ballooned the ball in the air and just couldn't head it away and offered scores. The winner in one of the worst games of football we've maybe seen in this country. They haven't let anything in. They should try and recreate that defensive solidity in other grounds. But, people say, try to keep it tight and win your home games and then see what happens in the away games. Bit by bit, they're getting points, they're getting results. It's not thrilling, but it's working.
Yeah, I worry about talking about Glens at this point of the season because it feels like we always say they're doing something well, and then we get the Christmas and they've fallen apart, and it's as you've been saying, the worst Glens team we've ever seen. So yeah, because like it almost kind of feels like a defensive run as well. I don't really feel like Dungannon were at their best at the weekend compared to what they have been on the way up. From my point of view, I thought 2-0 kind of flattered Glentoran a wee bit. I didn't think they were that good.
Yeah, it's not thrilling. It's not exciting. They're missing penalties at home. Fisher makes up for it by getting the goal in the next half. But it's despite the hype around Connolly and the nice run from Jenkins earlier on in the season, and a feeling that perhaps Jay Donnelly was going to find his mojo. It's labouring to wins is the way Glentoran are doing it, or even just draws, unless they're playing Linfield when they look like world beaters for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, I stand by the fact that it's not a good Glentoran team, and I think a lot of Glen men would tell you that as well. Um, but yeah, look, the tore us apart, and it's a little glimpse into what they could be. But as Joseph was saying, that's sort of Glentoran's whole thing, isn't it? Just nice flashes. But then, it depends how you look at it. If Lauren had won a scrappy 2-0 against Dungannon, weren't looking good, you'd be saying that's a sign of champions. So depends how you look. I'm not saying Glentoran are going to be champions, but one thing they do have going for them, I would say Gyolla is maybe the best keeper in the league at the minute.
Easily, I may as well write his name in the half team of the season already. He is locked in. He had all the physical traits to be a great keeper. The Glens took a gamble on him due to recent injury history, and he has repaid them. He has had a number of highlight reel saves, and he is the rock. He is the base of all the great work they do defensively.
Just massive as well. Like there's a thing for just a keeper being big, and there's less room to aim at. He's just huge, and it's not as if Linfield only had one chance the last time I saw the Glens play. Like there are plenty of chances, and he had a great game. Fair play.
You say massive, I say tangible traits. You say massive arms, I say large wingspan. This is the world of trying to be a hipster football podcaster in the year 2024. Looking at this game, it does bring to mind some of the things that has changed since I started this podcast too, and a bit. This is now the third season I've done this. Is that the teams at the top of the league are trying to find their players from a different pool. We know that amazing Glentoran team that almost went on a mega run but then didn't, and when the league in the first season of the podcast ran, that McMenamin side, that was based broadly on great players they had taken from the Irish League. That well has somewhat ran dry because of either Irish League players want bigger wages to go to these teams, and other teams are deciding to give a punt on them. It's almost as if some of the better players who would have went to the top teams in the league are thinking, you know what, maybe I can stick with Portadown, Ballymena, whoever it may be, Carrick, and be the main man here than fight it out. Like it's almost like the teams in the bottom six are investing in, dare I say it, franchise players. That wasn't the case perhaps before. Teams are seeing that if they gamble might be a strong word, but if they stick their neck out, commit and invest in the team, they will see some rewards. And that's where there's a bit of an evening out where there's a lot of examples where it's worked out. You'd probably say Fisher's one of them, Frankie Vid's one of them this season, GLI's one of them, but be it, name it, Linfield, Cliftonville, Lauren even, Glentoran, we could name a laundry list of where do these players come from, and then 6 months later they're never to be seen again and weren't really great in the first place. It's like they are having to kiss some frogs, and because they're not finding a prince every single time, that gives the chance for teams below them to have a bit more consistency in the players that they sign to make this league that we're currently looking at.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. in the past, it would have felt like it was like Glens and Linfield would have gone for those players maybe outside of the Irish League, and then the rest of the teams sort of fighting for the other star players coming up from the bottom. But it feels like with more teams like Cliftonville and stuff going outside the league, it's benefiting the entire league. You've got these teams at the bottom, or were at the bottom, like Ballymena or Carrick, keeping these players who, maybe 3, 4 years ago we would have seen Linfield snap them up straight away, or off the Glentoran. So in a weird way, with the teams going outside the league, it feels like it's making the entire league more competitive.
For sure. And that is a clear difference. Touching on Dungannon, because when I started this podcast, they were flirting around relegation. They were trying to get themselves out of that area around the bottom of the league, and they could descend back there if they can't keep this great set of results and form going. We talk about signings going well or not. Dungannon are doing it the way Dungannon have always done. They bring these players in, they nurture them, they develop them, and you often see these great Dungannon teams emerge, and this is definitely one over the past 10 years or so. This is one of the better Dungannon teams where they've signed well in the players they've brought in, but we name them every week on in this, the Scots and the Glennies. They are working brilliantly for them, and when it all comes together, it just, they sing as a side, and they didn't get the result there, but they're still hanging about in games. It's just that same weakness perhaps Dungannon always have. They can be caught out at the back. They're not as sturdy there. They don't have the same ability from a one-on-one defensive point of view, and they're just really strong at home.
Yeah, I think one example of lower teams benefiting from other teams going out of the league, John McGovern. I feel like him versus James Teelan. Teelan's went to Crusaders, not really ripped up any trees, whereas McGovern has went to Dungannon, and he's sort of the main man, scoring goals for fun, and it's just all about getting service to players like him. I think you're right in what you say. They're a little bit weaker defensively, but if they can just keep plugging along as they are, scoring more at home than the other team does, then I think they'll do all right.
Yeah, they feel like one of those teams that, realistically, you could sit down, you can go to them, and you can really get the better of them if you have the right game plan. But if you let them play their football, they're actually a really exciting team to watch as well. They feel like one of those teams that, as a neutral, when you see them playing, you probably want them to win because they play nice football. They have some great players. Players like, Maguire's been around the league a wee tiny bit, and it looks like he's finally settled and he's really kicking on at Dungannon. As a neutral, at times you actually feel like you want to see things like that happen. So they just feel like they're one of those teams now.
A surprising top six side based on what they've done over the past few weeks. Portadown are back there. They're there in sixth. They win out against their mini Ulster Derby rivals, let's say, in Loughgall. I skipped across Craigavon from Lurgan to Portadown, had a wee date night with Ross and Jack from around the grounds, and I missed the goal. A very Stephen McCulloch goal. If you don't get at least two of them a season, why even sign Stephen McCulloch? That's kind of what you're hoping for. We've seen him do that time and time again. He finally gets one in the red of Portadown. But outside of that goal and a few chances that they had, this did not instill any more confidence into me that Portadown aren't a side that are very stuck in their ways. Look, they're doing better than they hoped for at the start of the season. There's no denying that. But losing Josh Ukek has taken a aspect of this side that they're just trying to plug a hole in. They're just trying to refill that with Fife and or Mays, and that isn't working for them. And you take out a piece like Kim, and what he adds is a bit of height of a wide forward. He can run, he can dribble, he can make defenders panic. It just takes such a big part of that team. I've even seen when you lose Gary Thompson from that team, they just don't have the same ability to marshal the midfield, and they wane ever so slightly beyond that 65-70 minute mark. And when the goal went in for Loughgall, that got chalked off, it felt to me like, well, that was coming. It was clearly coming. Portadown get out of jail, there's no doubt. It was, of course, offside when you look at it, but I don't think a lot of referees would have spotted that, so give kudos to the referee. But when you're at home playing against what is currently the worst side in the league, a get right game for Portadown that was not in performance, it is in result.
Yeah, the result was the big thing at the end of the day, but it did not look good. I think a point would have been a fair enough result. I think not that Loughgall were great either, but the way they were pushing towards the end of the game, I think you're right in what you say. The goal in inverted commas was coming. Um, what you say about UKAC as well. There's, I think Eamon Fife's a cracking player, but I think you lose him a little bit when he's pushed out wide like that, and you do just miss that bit of bite and drive forward. And I think it was turning a little bit one dimensional. All the ball was just sort of getting pumped up the Abacan. There's no one within about 20 yards of them.
Look, Portadown are as direct as they come. They are one dimensional. They are route one. I think there's something to be said for that directness. They're getting results, and perhaps when it ain't going for you, it's frustrating. And let's not over panic based on two results against Ballymena and Glenavon. Oh, losing twice to Glenavon in a week because they lost in their cup game ain't fun. But they needed the win. They needed a result. They had their chances. My goodness, does Shane McCartan need a goal? He had a couple of chances there, and he couldn't make it stick or count. But does that keeping it down to 1-0 away from home? Does that instill any belief that maybe Loughgall could turn it around, or was that points missed?
I think it's probably points missed, to be honest. If you look at Portadown, there was the run there for a while where they were scoring in 90 plus minutes. And I think, in my opinion anyway, that's something you can only carry on for so long. And you're probably not playing that well if that keeps happening. So I think Loughgall probably coming into that game after the Glenavon results, probably thinking this is a game we really need to capitalise on. And coming away, if you score right at the end as well, and it was offside, you probably feel like that's a goal that was coming. We really should have capitalised earlier in the game and made that happen.
Joe, we can spend a wee second talking about your Reds. The form table looks horrible. Maybe the performances aren't as bad as that, but again, what does that matter? They've been up and down this year. I genuinely believe about maybe an hour into that game against Linfield that Cliftonville have a chance to be in the mix for this title if they can maybe get across the line here. They usually rip the worst teams in the league apart and are often good performers in the top six side games, and it's sometimes those teams in the middle, the Dungannons or the Carricks that make it difficult for Cliftonville. That doesn't seem to be the case at all. It's not working at the back. We all know about their attacking troubles, let's say, outside of a big goal bonanza against Loughgall. They've been hard to come by. Are Cliftonville a wee bit too style over substance at the minute? Can you still say 10 or so games into the season that you're finding yourself? And how are fans reacting to, despite being a couple of games behind the other teams, sitting in 8th, not having won the league in 4 games?
Yeah, I think it is a wee bit. A couple of games ago, I was sort of thinking we need Rory to come back and Casey to come back, and then that's us settled. It felt like that's what we were missing, especially in the midfield where we're lacking that sort of heel impact. And I think I said it to you at the time. That's what it just feels like we're missing. But since he's come back in, and it's not like Rory Hale's to blame at all, but it hasn't had the impact that I thought it was going to have. And it is starting to get a bit worrying because the longer it goes on, the further the teams at the top get away. And look, I was obviously maybe a bit rash in saying that I thought we had a chance to win the league this year, but I think it is probably a surprise to everyone that we're sitting exactly where we are. Now, that lack of goal threat, it was obvious at the start of the season it was going to be an issue, but I don't think we thought it was going to be this much of an issue. So it is. It's starting to get more and more worrying. No wins in the last three games, but then the teams, Ballymena, Larne, and Carrick. Ballymena obviously on that great run, Larne, the team that they are, and then Carrick, that new manager bounce. So it's an interesting one.
And Larne don't play again. We'll talk about their game coming up soon. I guess it'll give you a chances to talk about what probably most people have their eyes on, and it's not this week, it's the week after. This is what the Europa Conference brings. They're not particularly pulling up trees in their own league at the minute, but Windsor Park, Larne, Shamrock Rovers. That's a biggie, isn't it?
That's huge. I think that's the standout tie they've got themselves. Um, It'll obviously be billed as which league is better, League of Ireland, Irish League. But as you say, Shamrock Rovers not their usual imperious selves. But I'm sure on kickingmatch.ie they're talking about Larne also aren't their imperious selves. So
I think that Larne will be fitter and be better than that assessment. Shamrock Rovers are probably a better overall team, but aren't playing up to their standard. It would be very disappointing, and we'll talk about it in the podcast next week. It would be very disappointing from all Irish League fans if it's a very easy walk in the park 3-0 for Shamrock Rovers. And I think we'll all get very excited if Larne do pull off a victory, which screams 1-1, of course, saying all that. And even if Larne do win, I imagine League of Ireland circles will go, yeah, end of our season, we're tired, and we're doing our best, and that's the worst Shamrock Rovers side that's ever existed, etc., etc. I'm sure they have those over down there as well. So, we'll see if Derry can make it happen for them in their league. But again, that ain't what we're talking about. So, lots of fronts they'll be fighting on, and I guess as these weeks go on, the sooner the likes of Leemore Miller coming back could help this Lawrence side, because that's maybe one of Neil scoring 4 goals in the Continental Shield. Remember him?
yeah, that's some effort. All in the second half as well. I've always thought it's a bit of a shame that he doesn't get more game time up there, but obviously when you had bonus and you have Andy Ryan ahead of you, it's going to be hard to muscle your way in. But what better way to try to prove yourself than 4 in 45 minutes?
It's it's tough to see that obviously because there was the rumors at the start of the season about him coming back, and I was very excited about it. No disrespect at all to Donnelly, but he was the one that I wanted. So it's tough when we're in our current run of form and goals that you see him up there scoring.
Just with that mention of one of the top 10 Irish League strikers of the 21st Century League bonus, he sneaked his way into the Northern Ireland squad. A few injuries, a few dropouts means the man who scored a hat-trick for his Dutch employers squeezes into the Northern Ireland squad, gets himself number 7. Great, you'll be framing that forever. And sneaks onto the pitch against Belarus for Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, Northern Ireland couldn't convert any of their countless chances. Personally, I'm not too worried about this because I very much what was the analogy I used? I feel like this whole Northern Ireland team is like the base of a sourdough loaf. It's just let it ferment, and if it's doing all right, that's fine. But ultimately, I'm not about to stick that in the oven, and I'm not going to need it right now. So let them gel, let them do their thing, and winning along the way would be a huge bonus. Gets 15 minutes, didn't get the chance to influence the game, but he was one of many that was in that squad, and people have said to me, look at all these ex-Irish League players. yes, I think we should point at it and go, isn't that great that we're having players come to the Irish League playing at the national football for our national team? It wasn't something that always happened before. I would remember it as, oh my goodness, here comes Peter Thompson and he's going to play, and this is great. And even when he went away to play for Stockport, we were just still excited. And then, of course, we saw the likes of Dallas and others and Macaulay's on their way. So this is not new, but it's good to see Hume starting clear, like cog in this team now. Kind of Bradley technically, but it feels like he was whipped away before he could really show his might in this division. But Bonus and Smith and others, Brad Lyons is in the team. He's been in the squad a couple of times. So good, but also you want to feel like this should be expected now.
Yeah, it's good in a way where you sort of look at Trey Hume and you don't think, oh, ex-Irish League player, because he's made the jump so seamlessly. He's just a Northern Ireland player at this point. And you do want it to get to that point where it's just like, oh yeah, he played for Crusaders back in the day or whatever. But they should probably build like a national training centre to let the Irish League players be around that environment a bit more often. But yeah, it's obviously good to see. I wasn't hugely pleased with Bonus sort of being shoved out on the left. I'd like to see him get his chance through the middle. But yeah, just a frustrating night all around.
We look ahead for, well, not the 100th time, because I've done a few interviews and a few double headers, and ultimately I've done podcasts where there's no games to look forward to, so that was a lie. But for around the 90 something time, we look to a full schedule of games, and we will start our fares on Friday. Loughgall against Linfield. At what point of it being still 0-0 will you be nervous on Friday night, Ross? Is it like 35 minutes? Or at what point will you start to get the jitters and get a bit more angst in your voice as you shout, quote unquote, encouragement at the players?
Probably at about 5:15 when I get out of work. To be honest, I don't like the thought of it at all. I love Loughgall.
Get in the net!
I don't like the thought of it on a cold Friday night.
In
Probably
Loughgall.
probably about 20 minutes in. If we've missed chances, you start to think I've seen this one before. But yeah, about 20 minutes is when I start getting a little bit twitchy. But I am obviously the most negative man in the world and don't actually like Linfield. So
That's just a Linfield fan.
How will the worst Linfield team ever go against the best Loughgall team 1 year removed ever? It's again, like, Loughgall have been all right at home against these sides until this year. They never truly got torn apart on a regular basis at home against teams in the top six. But Linfield are a different beast, and will. I don't know if this is a good style clash for Loughgall either, because Linfield will pass and they'll pass and they'll pass and they'll pass and they'll pass. And Loughgall's, one of their issues is concentration, specifically at the back. And we've seen them concede a ton against Cliftonville, and I could see that being as well. It might be 2-0, the same way that Larne only beat Loughgall, whatever it was, 2-0 at Inver, but it's Linfield, and by how many, I think, Joe?
Yeah, 100%. I think it could be quite a poor night for Loughgall, to be honest. I was thinking like 4-0 to Linfield.
Yeah, it feels like a red card's coming here somewhere as well. Just cold night, slip of the ball, bad tackle, night goes from bad to worse, etc.
not to be negative again, but like even if we go 1-0 up, like we just like to concede an equaliser. So if Loughgall are going to take anything from it, if they can just stay in the game 1 or 2 until the last 10 minutes. You saw it again on Saturday past there. There's you know
How
I don't like
long
that. I don't like that idea.
will that Portadown game just live long in the memory over the next 3 years every time? Because the amount of people, like Linfield fans that I talk to, that like they don't, you can't even bring up that Portadown game. Like, don't even talk to me about it. It's just so harming. It's so it's a horror show to them that the the fact that that usually doesn't happen did, and now there's a chance they'll do it every game.
I'm yet to sleep through a night since that.
It's
Like
just
Ryan
it's
Mays
just Ryan
coming
Mays and
through.
those ball boys jumping into each other.
Yeah, it's just it's definitely a bit of muscle memory, but in a negative way. In that it just I never feel quite confident, and I think it sort of looks like the team don't as well. Even 1-0 up, I think we just look so susceptible to throwing one away.
Yeah, I'll just see whatever it is, 2-3, 3-0 Linfield there. Cliftonville Glenavon starting at half two at Solitude, early start, so that the Cliftonville ladies team, people can go and see both when they're playing later on in the day. This is not a fun matchup,
No,
Joe.
absolutely.
Glenavon now Glenavon might be without Barney McKeown, who did an immense goal stopping slide in the first half against Ballymena, but that was pretty much his final action. So if they are without a defender who people at Mournview will literally claim can walk on water, that's one cog out of this back line. But maybe one will just fit in, it'll be fine. But this will not be an easy side to break down. Ballymena struggled to do it. Glentoran couldn't get through it. Others have tried and failed. So again, Cliftonville need this victory, but I could see it being 0-0 60 minutes in. I can imagine you're sitting there looking at your watch getting nervy that it's still
Yeah,
0-0.
100%. I was saying I think we needed this break this weekend to sort of settle down, get things back on the straight and narrow, but we didn't need this fixture to be the one back again. As you say, they're a tough team to break down, and with those teams, you need that sort of out of nowhere goal when you're playing against them, and that just does not feel like what we have in us right now. So I'm not overly confident for it, to be honest. I really don't see us winning it, which is not a great place to be, especially with where we are. We definitely need to. So at most, I'm thinking a draw, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's like a 1-0 Glenavon.
I think it's a 1-1, 0-0. I wasn't able to fully express how much lacking in wing play Glenavon are, and that could be something that others will exploit. Duna isn't on the pitch consistently. Peter Campbell's being moved into a more central role. He's one of the few players that Glenavon side have that can truly do something excellent. He can pull something out of a hat. He can be a difference maker. Doesn't have the pace, the ability to beat a man that he perhaps didn't always have in his locker, but he has that attacking flair that they maybe don't have across the pitch. You know, how much mileage can you get out of McDade and O'Connor? They rotated to a certain extent on Saturday, so it's Glenavon's issue will be, yes, they can hold firm, but do they have someone to pop it in? They don't have a McGovern-esque player, so that's why I say maybe 0-0, 1-1, and it's a late goal from a set piece that breaks Cliftonville's hearts. What are we expecting to be the front line? Is it swapping about, or is the likes of Taylor Stephen emerging as the first choice man?
Yeah, I think you can still see it swap about. Stephen, there's certainly potential in there for him, but it doesn't feel like Jim quite knows at the moment. And obviously, it's a big change from the last season, so fully understand. But no, I think that's what makes it more worrying as well. I'm sitting here now thinking, I don't know what way this is going to go. I don't know what way we're going to line out, which is rough at this point of the season, I think.
Ballymena Coleraine, outside of Lauren Crues, it's the big game of the weekend. Can Ballymena make it 9 wins in a row, beating Coleraine with Coleraine OB? It's it's how much Coleraine can get out of their shells, how much they'll have the ability to not see this as a big time game and get the players that usually are difference makers for them to play with that freedom that they need to. I thought the Glacken goal against Carrick shows that they have skill and ability that few other teams in this league have. It's about being able to do that week to week.
Yeah, I really don't know how to call this one. I was thinking about what I was going to say, and by the time I'd got to the end of the thought, I'd changed my mind. I fancy a high scoring draw. I just see, even now I'm thinking I'm not sure. It's all about if Coleraine can actually turn up. If Coleraine turn up to the best of their abilities, I fancy them to win, but I just can't see them doing that is the problem.
Yeah, I kind of see goals. I can see this being like a 3-2 exclusively scored from corners.
Nothing wrong with that. A good fun way to have a game of football, but I don't know. Ben Kennedy hat trick of penalties to decide it.
My goodness, like how many can he have? It's look, if you come up, he's still knocking them in. You know, it doesn't really matter that he's got plenty of them on tape. The goalkeepers aren't able to stop them. I'm leaning towards it being maybe a 3-2 Coleraine, which just seems so weird because I'm giving an example of all these reasons why it isn't working. But in a game like this, particularly if Ballymena go like 2-1 ahead or able to pull it back to like 2-2, I just think if Coleraine can kind of play with a certain amount of freedom and abandonment, why not? Why can't you just see a Reece Campbell or a Glacken or a Murray take on a player and score? It's up the other end. They maybe Coleraine want this to be more of a ramshackle barn buster.
I actually forgot how much of a cracker this one was on the opening night. And I could well see it being the same again. And I think you're right, Coleraine, that suits them a little bit more. They just have that little element of chaos and
Mm-hmm.
whoever straight shootout.
Swift's Ports, it's at Stagmore Park, and the record is not just something that's been hanging about this year. I saw the stats going around, not the hand, of course, but this even goes on last year. It's been an amazing 2024 for the Swifts at Stagmore Park. This feels like it's been a tricky fixture for the Ports over the years. They did win late on against Dungannon, but it's a different game on a Saturday. Will, as much as I like that centre back pairing of Alton Top and McKinnon, goals still seem to squeeze by, and can they shackle McGovern? It's hard to back anything bar a Swifts win here, which might be hyperbolic, but it just feels so much more. I have to squint to see anything that isn't Dungannon 2-0.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be quite a big bounce back from Dungannon from this week. So I think Portadown, as I said earlier, have been kind of scraping through quite a few games so far this season. I don't think they've been particularly great. They're playing that Route One football. Dungannon, very different style of football. I think it might not be a great day for Portadown, so I'm gonna say 3-0.
I yeah, I think I can see it being 1-0, Ports go 1-0 ahead, and Swifts pull it back. Maybe even do very similar to what that Mid Ulster Derby was like, where the home side pulls it back. But yeah, no, Swifts 2-0 for me. Glenn's Carrick with the ascendancy. Glentoran at home. There's something about this fixture that feels like it's being played every other week. It's hard to not. It's hard to go Carrick here, isn't it? Because Glentoran aren't scoring goals, but they're not letting a lot in, and it would be some feather in the cap of Baxter if he's able to go to the Oval, not only win but score a couple of goals. That that would be impressive. But I think it's probably closer to 1-1, 0-0. 1-1 is what I'd say. So a goal, yay. A win, no.
I, I fancy the Glens here. If this fixture is reversed, I'd be all over another Baxter win. But I just think
I agree.
3 o'clock on a Saturday at the Oval, I just think is pretty routine. And yeah, probably, if ever there's a chance for Fisher or Donnelly to start getting their shooting boots on, you got to be eyeballing Carrick. new bounce or not, to ship a few goals.
Yeah, I'll stick with 1-1. Lauren Cruise at Inver Park. This is just not. There's something odd about this being played in daytime. Is that just me?
It's bang on.
I know it will be daytime for long because R.I.P. Sunshine in 2024. However, I know I'm constantly saying there's a chink in the armor for Lauren, but this Cruise side, they do let in goals, don't they? But they can, when they want to, they can pop up and get them themselves. I can see the Cruise taking an early lead here and making it really difficult for Lauren. So I think it's 2-1 Cruise maybe, but that's perhaps over egging the fact that Lauren have had. I think Cruise will start well, but how much does the week off benefit Lauren? I know a lot of their big players will have been playing international football, but does that benefit them, or does that set them to be a touch rusty? Because the Cruise, going off the back of nearly sticking it against Linfield at home, that's probably not a bad run up, is it?
No, I think that week off almost gives them that. I could see it being a bit of a slow start for Lauren, but then just coming through. I think the one thing about this fixture is in previous years, I would have certainly said it's a bit boring. I could see it being quite a good game. I could see it being surprisingly open, uh, and a bit back and forth. But I think Lauren just have that thing in them where even if they are a wee bit under the cosh against these teams that are the traditional sort of top six, it just feels like they consistently win out against them. So I could see it being a bit back and forth, maybe like a 3-2 Lauren.
Does that feel right, Ross?
Yeah, I just fancy Lauren to win. They haven't won in a little while now, so I just think they're due one, and Tiernan will have them well drilled because he obviously wasn't best pleased after that Dungannon game. So I fancy a pretty comfortable Lauren win, maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it. This there's an inkling where this is where Lauren stick on the leathers, rev up the motorcycle, and ascend to the Gibson Cup and do it in style. Fellas, there it is. 100 not out, I guess, if I'm using cricket metaphors. Do you have a tally? Because I tell you what, I don't, of how many appearances you have, because it's a pretty easy way to tally up what your percentage of podcasts you appeared on.
Is it 9 or 10?
Probably 8 or 9, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, 8 or 9.
Okay.
I would not have expected that, but I guess you know what, the people that could be lies, of course. So I'm not checking in the next 5 minutes, but no, look, like I said, home team, you were here for the big one at the start of the season, the most listened to podcast or episode this podcast has ever seen. That's been a nice little left off point to what has been the biggest year of the pod. I guess that's the aim. I'm sure it's what you've been able to see with the growth of your channel and Around the Grounds. You just gotta go and do it. How far is Around the Grounds into its fledgling career? How long has it been in the world, if I've been in it since August 22?
I think this is maybe year 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I think it was just after things started to get back to normal after COVID. We've sort of pushed on from there.
It's funny because I don't want to be too looking back, because again, ultimately it's only been a short period of time, but definitely the Irish League is changed because of COVID. I think it continues to change in the social media world, and I know social media has been about for ages, but the ability to put out content, the confidence of people to put out content has increased. And every year, there was plenty there's a few podcasts floating around when I decided to give it a go. I'm sure there was people doing the odd bit of game, what you guys do, vlogging, when you guys started it. Now that we've been doing it X amount of years, there's been podcasts popping up, and there's been people that do similar things to you popping up, and I I've also seen the likes of fan pages for teams. I've seen people that are, whatever it is, they like to put up graphics, like to put up images, like to post news. I'm really glad that there has never really had an emergence of and I think people see through it anyway, like kind of emerging news, like nonsense rumors just to kind of, stir stuff up. That has been the case, but I think if I can say it, there's a certain amount of, you have to be bold to go out and do it. As someone that has said, screw it, I'll put it out one day. And I think you'd probably echo that of, not that you want to have 30 more quote unquote competitors, but whatever it might be it you want to vlog your own club, like Peaky did, with all the teams that, he's followed, be it you want to post images, whatever, or even write match reports or something. Now's a great time. You're not going to get hundreds and thousands of views instantly, but if you do it, you enjoy it, I think you will find an audience. And the key thing is, if you're consistent and you're earnest and you put in the work, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's no harm in trying something, because realistically, you're going to match anyway, and if nobody reads it or watches or whatever, oh well. Like, fair play to you for giving it a go.
That's essentially what we were doing for the first few years anyway. Like, we just kept at it, really.
Yeah, you just got to enjoy it. And sometimes it's just nice to have that. I use the word autonomy, which it seems over the top, but it's nice to have that control over. The only reason that I've done 100 episodes is because I've decided 100 times to do a podcast, and no one's forcing me to put it out every week. No one's forcing you to put out the videos. And look, life happens and it comes your way, but it's fun, it's exciting. So if you have an inkling or a notion, and it's so easy for someone like me to say this, but I am saying what I'm saying, so here is your sign. Go do it, go tweet, go post, go video, go whatever, because it's fun, it's exciting, and if you love something, why not do it? Guys, talking across the internet via a video calling platform and recording it and sticking out on Spotify, I like it. It's fun, and it's nice to do it with you guys. And if people want to find out more about you, or see or hear or whatever, and get the most up to date, I don't know, ball boy, interactions at Portland games or whatever, where can they find you online?
So we're at Around the Grounds NI on Instagram and TikTok, AT Grounds NI on Twitter. We're actually only doing ball boy content now, so if you don't like that, you're in trouble.
It's my only TikTok video, and I think it might stay that way.
My personal stuff is Ross Welsh 8. So as Jack was saying, if you just want a negative tweet about Linfield every 3 weeks, that's where you'd go for that.
My personal stuff, it's all linked under Around the Grounds NI, so it's all in there in the bio.
I want to say in this part, rather than the wee nonsense after part, which most people probably would know of, I genuinely want to say thank you to every single person. I'm not going away. I love this more than ever, but every single person that has ever given up, it literally is a massively long list, but every single person that's jumped on the podcast, I am thankful for, from Michael Clark doing the first one, to you guys, from journalists to fans, whatever. They all have given up time. And to be honest, bar Michael, who I just knew off the cuff from other bits and pieces, I knew nobody here. So that should be proof of, if you ask, I've had plenty of no's, but the ones that have said yes are nice. And you guys said yes, and here we are now. We should do this again. We will do it again. Maybe we'll do it with, people in front of us. Let's just see. But guys, thank you, and until Kicking Match 101 or 200, whatever next one you're on, goodbye. Thank you.
All the best.
Thanks
Peter.
for having us again.
Boys, I don't usually welcome people into this little cave post-show. The music's playing. We'll see how it goes. I'm not going to force you to plug the good old podcast, but look, it's episode 100. It's a little bit fun. it's a little bit different. What I've truly brought you on to do in short form is that if we, because I didn't make the same kind of prediction, if let's say all's going well and you guys are sitting here on Kick a Match 200 or 150, let's call it 200, and we're using this as a time capsule, who wants to give me a really long burn hot take that will crack open and we'll go, wow, got that right. It took 2 and a bit seasons to do 100 episodes. We'll see if that's how long it takes to get to 200.
What season is this now? 24, 25?
Yeah.
Ballymena to get through a round of Europe in 25, 26.
Wow. You didn't need to make it that specific as 25, 26, but you did all the same. Go on, Joe. What's your time capsule prediction that will crack open and never talk about, probably?
Maybe for Ross to have a positive opinion on it.
No, that's too haunting.
Stephen Baxter to still be at Carrick in 5 years with them being solidified as a top 3.
Wow, that's some going.
Stephen
I'm going to say
Exactly, I think it's bold.
by the time that Kick a Match 200 is here, it might not be at this time of the season, because I think the season may move in some form. It might only be a shift, but it might not be Kick a Match starting in August. It could be later, but look, we'll see. 100 episodes, we'll look back and go, nothing has changed. It's all the same, or everything has changed. But boys, as you all know, that if you're listening to this podcast at this stage, you should be following Kick a Match on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. I'm not going to say their name out loud because I'm looking at them right now. If you want to sit up, relax, chill, put your feet up and not press any fiddly buttons on your podcast players, you can ask your sports speaker to play Kicking Match, an Irish League podcast. You gotta say it all, as Kick a Match is probably some sort of, I don't know, some song from 1972. I don't know. I say the full thing every time. And of course, if you have this player in your hand, follow, subscribe. It's free, it's easy. There's more people who follow and subscribe to this podcast than maybe any episode that I recorded in the first series. That's how much it's grown. Be a part of the gang. Until Kicking Match 101, or maybe Kicking Match 200. Tally ho.
Huge.
Brilliant.